You know what they say about small towns in New England? Everyone knows everyone else's business, and if they don't, they'll make something up. I'm Wes Farrow, 38 years old, and I run security for high-end events in our little corner of Connecticut where the houses cost more than most people make in a decade. It's not glamorous work, but it pays well enough to keep up with my wife's expensive tastes. My wife, Cleo Marver, she kept her maiden name for professional reasons, works as a marketing executive at Lake & Associates, the most prestigious advertising agency in town. Vivienne Lake, the owner, is one of those women who commands attention the moment she walks into a room. Tall, elegant, with silver hair that looks intentionally styled and eyes that seem to see right through you. Cleo worships the ground she walks on. Tonight was supposed to be special. The annual charity gala at the Marver family estate, Cleo's parents' place, a sprawling mansion that overlooks the Connecticut River. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, mainly because it meant I could finally relax instead of working security at someone else's party. But as I watched Cleo flit around the grand ballroom in her designer dress, something felt off. She'd been distant for months, always on her phone, always working late, always too tired to talk when she got home. I told myself it was just stress from her job, but tonight confirmed what I'd been suspecting. "Wes, darling, you look positively miserable," said Margot Blackwood, one of Cleo's closest friends. She appeared beside me with 2 glasses of champagne, her perfectly manicured nails clicking against the crystal. "Where's your lovely wife?" "Making the rounds," I said, accepting the champagne. "You know how she is at these things." Margot's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh yes, I certainly do. She's been quite busy lately, hasn't she? All those late nights at the office with Owen Reece." Owen Reece. I knew the name. Tech entrepreneur, married to some socialite from Hartford, always showing up in the local business section of the newspaper. What I didn't know was why Margot was mentioning him in connection with my wife. "They're working on some big campaign together," I said carefully. "Is that what they're calling it?" Margot took a sip of her champagne, watching me over the rim of her glass. "Beth saw them at the Riverside Inn last Tuesday. Very cozy table for 2. The Riverside Inn was 40 minutes away, not exactly the kind of place you'd go for a business lunch. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I kept my expression neutral. Maybe they were meeting a client there. "Maybe," Margot said, but her tone suggested she didn't believe it for a second. "Oh look, there's your wife now, with Vivienne and... is that Owen?" I followed her gaze across the room. Sure enough, there was Cleo, laughing at something Owen was saying, while Vivienne looked on with that calculating expression she always wore. Owen was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, handsome in that generic way that screams expensive personal trainer and good genetics, wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary. "I should go say hello," I said. "You should," Margot agreed. "I'm sure they'd love to see you." As I made my way across the ballroom, dodging waiters with trays of hors d'oeuvres and clusters of gossiping guests, I caught snippets of conversation that made my suspicions grow stronger. The way Cleo touched Owen's arm when she laughed, the way he leaned in close when he spoke to her, the way Vivienne watched them both with what looked like amusement. "Wes!" Cleo's voice was bright, maybe a little too bright. "There you are. I was just telling Owen about your work. Owen, this is my husband, Wes Farrow." Owen extended his hand with a smile that didn't quite mask the guilt in his eyes. "Great to meet you, Wes. Cleo talks about you all the time." "Does she?" I shook his hand, noting how quickly he pulled away. "Funny, she's never mentioned you?" An awkward silence fell over our little group. Vivienne broke it with a laugh that sounded like wind chimes in a storm. "Men?" she said, shaking her head. "Always so territorial." "Owen, didn't you say you needed to find your wife?" "Right, yes." Owen glanced at Cleo, and I caught something pass between them, a look that confirmed everything Margot had implied. "It was nice meeting you, Wes." He disappeared into the crowd, leaving me alone with my wife and her boss. Vivienne excused herself a moment later, claiming she needed to speak with the mayor about something, but not before giving me a look that suggested she knew exactly what was going on. "He seems nice," I said to Cleo once we were alone. "He's brilliant," she said, her eyes following Owen across the room. "The campaign we're working on could revolutionize how people think about sustainable technology." "Sounds fascinating. You'll have to tell me more about it sometime." "You wouldn't understand," she said dismissively. "It's very technical." There it was, the casual condescension that had been creeping into our conversations more and more lately, the assumption that I was too simple to understand her important work, too beneath her to be worth explaining things to. We found our assigned table and sat down for dinner. The conversation flowed around us, local politics, business deals, gossip about who was sleeping with whom. I contributed when spoken to, but mostly I watched my wife. She was in her element here, charming and sophisticated, everything I'd fallen in love with 8 years ago. But something had changed. She kept checking her phone under the table, smiling at messages she didn't share with me. When Owen walked past our table, she followed him with her eyes. When his wife, a thin, nervous-looking woman named Patricia, mentioned that Owen had been working late a lot recently, Cleo's cheeks flushed pink. The final course arrived, a beautifully plated salad that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. Cleo picked at hers while scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to pay attention to the conversation anymore. That's when she leaned over and whispered the words that changed everything. "I can leave you any time." She said it so casually, like she was commenting on the weather. Not angry, not emotional, just matter of fact. Like she was reminding me of a basic truth I should already know. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger. This woman who shared my bed, my home, my life, had just told me she could walk away without a second thought. And the way she said it, with that little smile playing at the corners of her mouth, suggested she was already planning to. "Really?" I said, keeping my voice as calm as hers had been. "Really," she confirmed, taking a sip of wine. "I have my own career, my own money, my own life. I don't need you, Wes. I never did." The conversation at our table continued around us, but everything else faded into background noise. I could hear my own heartbeat, could feel the weight of my wedding ring on my finger. 8 years of marriage, and she could leave me any time, just like that. I smiled coldly and reached for my ring. The gold band slipped off easily. Too easily, like it had been waiting for this moment. I held it for a second, feeling its familiar weight, then dropped it into her salad with a soft plop. Cleo's eyes went wide. "What are you—" "You're right," I said, standing up from the table. "You can leave any time. So can I." Several people at nearby tables had noticed the commotion. I could see Margot's delighted expression, Beth's shocked face, even Patricia Reece looking over with curiosity. Perfect. Witnesses were exactly what I needed. I straightened my jacket and walked away from the table, leaving my wife staring at her salad where my wedding ring sat nestled among the arugula and cherry tomatoes like some bizarre garnish. I found Vivienne near the bar, talking to the mayor about waterfront development. She looked up as I approached, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow raised in question. "Ms. Lake," I said formally, "I wonder if I might have a word." "Of course," she said, excusing herself from the mayor. "Though I think after 8 years of marriage to my star employee, you can call me Vivienne." "I'm not sure how much longer I'll be married to your star employee," I said quietly. Her smile was sharp as a blade. "I see. And what do you intend to do about that?" "I was hoping you might join me for a drink. Somewhere more visible." Vivienne's eyes sparkled with interest. "How visible are we talking?" "Visible enough that everyone here sees us leave together. Visible enough that the photos end up on social media. Visible enough that Cleo realizes she's not the only one who can play games." "Interesting," Vivienne mused. "And what makes you think I'd be willing to participate in your little drama?" "Because you're a smart businesswoman who knows that Cleo's been having an affair with Owen Reece, and you're wondering how that might affect your agency's reputation when it comes out. Because you're curious to see what I'm capable of when I'm pushed too far. And because you're bored, and this is the most interesting thing that's happened at one of these parties in years." Vivienne laughed, a genuine sound this time. "You know what, Wes? You're absolutely right on all counts. Shall we?" She took my arm, and we walked toward the exit together. I could feel eyes following us, could hear the whispers starting already. By the time we reached the door, I was certain that at least a dozen people had taken photos with their phones. "One question," Vivienne said as we stepped out into the cool night air. "What happens next?" "Next," I said, "we let Cleo make the first move. She's going to panic, try to control the narrative, probably accuse me of being unstable or having a breakdown. And when she does, I'll be ready." "And if she doesn't panic?" I thought about the look on her face when I dropped the ring in her salad, the way her perfect composure had cracked just for a moment. "Oh, she'll panic," I said. "Trust me, I know my wife." The next morning, I woke up in my own bed alone. Cleo had come home sometime after midnight. I'd heard her car in the driveway, heard her heels clicking across the hardwood floors downstairs, but she'd chosen to sleep in the guest room. Fine by me. I'd spent the evening at Vivienne's penthouse downtown, talking strategy and drinking expensive scotch until well past midnight. My phone was buzzing constantly with text messages, missed calls, and social media notifications. Word traveled fast in our little town, especially when it involved drama at the Marver family estate. The first message was from my Aunt Ruth, who somehow always knew everything that happened in town within hours of it happening. "Wesley James Farrow, what in heaven's name did you do last night? Mildred Peterson saw you leaving the party with that Lake woman. Call me immediately." The second was from Jasper Mills, my oldest friend and one of the local police officers. Dude, what the hell? Everyone's talking about you and Vivienne Lake. Cleo's been calling the station asking about domestic disturbance laws. You need to talk to me ASAP. The third was from Cleo herself, sent at 3 a.m. We need to discuss this situation rationally. Come downstairs when you're ready to act like an adult. I deleted that one without responding. Over the next hour, I scrolled through social media, watching the story spread like wildfire. Someone had posted a photo of me dropping the ring in Cleo's salad with the caption, "When keeping it real goes wrong." Another showed me leaving with Vivienne, both of us looking like we were heading somewhere much more interesting than home. The comments were brutal and hilarious in equal measure. About time someone put Princess Cleo in her place. Wait, isn't she the one who's always posting about her perfect marriage? I heard she's been stepping out with that tech guy Owen Reece. Vivienne Lake is a total boss. Good for her. I was making coffee when Cleo finally appeared in the kitchen, still wearing last night's dress, but looking significantly less polished than she had at the party. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a mess, and there were dark circles under her eyes. "We need to talk," she said without preamble. "Good morning to you too," I replied, not looking up from the coffee maker. "Don't." Her voice was sharp. "Don't pretend this is normal. Don't pretend what you did last night was acceptable." "What exactly did I do that was unacceptable?" I asked, finally turning to face her. "I had a drink with your boss. I didn't realize that was against the rules. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know. You made a scene, threw your ring in my food like some kind of dramatic teenager, and then left with another woman. How is that not unacceptable?" I poured myself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter. "You told me you could leave me any time. I was just demonstrating that the feeling is mutual." "That's not—" She stopped, clearly frustrated. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "Then what did you mean, Cleo? Because from where I was sitting, it sounded like you were reminding me how little our marriage means to you." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again. For a moment, she looked almost vulnerable, like the woman I'd married 8 years ago. Then her expression hardened. "I want you to fix this," she said. "Call Vivienne, tell her last night was a mistake. Post something on social media explaining that you had too much to drink and acted irrationally. Do whatever you need to do to make this go away." "And why would I do that?" "Because if you don't, I'll make sure everyone knows you're having some kind of breakdown. I'll tell them you've been unstable, jealous, paranoid. I'll make you look like a pathetic husband who couldn't handle his successful wife." There it was, the threat I'd been expecting. Cleo's first instinct when cornered was always to attack, to shift blame, to make herself the victim. "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Tell them whatever you want. But you might want to think about how that story sounds when people start asking questions about Owen Reece." Her face went pale. "What about Owen? Come on, Cleo, you really think nobody's noticed? The late nights, the business trips, the way you light up when his name comes up. Margot saw you two at the Riverside Inn last week. Beth's been talking about how cozy you looked at the Morrisons' anniversary party. Even Patricia Reece is starting to ask questions." "You're being ridiculous," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Owen and I are working together, that's all." "Then you won't mind if I give Patricia a call, let her know how dedicated her husband is to his work?" "You wouldn't. Try me." We stared at each other across the kitchen, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out her next move. This was the woman who'd built her career on manipulating perceptions, on crafting narratives that served her clients' interests. But for once, she was the one scrambling to control a story that was spiraling beyond her reach. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivienne. "Coffee? I have some interesting information about your wife's extracurricular activities." I showed Cleo the message. "Looks like I have plans this morning." "Wes, please." For the first time since this whole thing started, she sounded genuinely desperate. "We can work this out. We can go to counseling, talk through whatever problems we're having, but this public humiliation, it's not helping anyone." "You're right," I said, heading toward the door. "It's not helping you at all." I met Vivienne at a small cafe downtown, the kind of place where the coffee was overpriced and the clientele consisted mainly of wealthy retirees and young professionals trying to be seen. She was already seated at a corner table when I arrived, looking impossibly elegant in a simple black dress and oversized sunglasses. "You look terrible," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks, you look fantastic, as always." "I know." She pushed a manila envelope across the table. "These might interest you." Inside were photographs, Owen and Cleo at various locations around town, always together, always looking more intimate than two business colleagues should. There was one of them holding hands outside a hotel in Hartford, another of Owen kissing Cleo's cheek at what looked like a restaurant. "Where did you get these?" I asked. "I have my sources. The question is, what do you plan to do with them?" I studied the photos, feeling that cold anger settled deeper in my chest. "How long have you known?" "About the affair? Months. Owen's not nearly as discreet as he thinks he is, and Cleo's been distracted at work. It was only a matter of time before it became obvious." "And you didn't think to mention it to me?" Vivienne removed her sunglasses and looked at me with those piercing eyes. "It wasn't my business to tell you, but now that you've made it public, now that it's affecting my agency's reputation, it's become my business." "How is it affecting your reputation?" "Owen's wife hired us to handle PR for her family's foundation. If this affair comes out, we lose that contract. More importantly, I can't have my employees conducting their personal lives in ways that reflect poorly on the company." "So you're firing Cleo?" "I'm considering it. But first, I want to see how she handles the fallout from last night. If she can manage her own crisis effectively, maybe she's worth keeping around. If she can't..." She shrugged elegantly. "And what about Owen?" "Owen's not my employee, but his wife is my client, and she deserves to know what kind of man she's married to." We sat in silence for a moment, sipping our coffee and watching the morning crowd hurry past on the sidewalk outside. I felt like I was standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down into an abyss that would change everything once I jumped. "What are you thinking?" Vivienne asked. "I'm thinking that Cleo was right about one thing. She can leave me any time, but she's wrong if she thinks she can do it on her terms, with her reputation intact and her conscience clear." "And what terms would you prefer?" I looked at the photos again, at the evidence of my wife's betrayal spread out on the cafe table like playing cards. I want her to understand what it feels like to lose everything: her marriage, her reputation, her sense of control over her own narrative. I want her to know that actions have consequences. Vivienne smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "Then we should probably discuss strategy. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories." By the time I got home that afternoon, Cleo had launched her counteroffensive. I could tell because my phone was ringing nonstop with calls from mutual friends, family members, and even a few clients asking if I was okay and if I needed help dealing with stress. The first call I answered was from Beth Morrison, Cleo's other best friend and co-conspirator. "Wes, honey, I'm so worried about you," she gushed in that fake sweet voice she used when she was fishing for information. "Cleo told me you've been under a lot of pressure lately with work and everything. She's really concerned about your mental state." "Is she?" I said dryly. "How thoughtful of her." "She mentioned that you've been drinking more, staying up all night, making accusations about her work relationships." "Honey, that doesn't sound like the Wes we all know and love." "The Wes you all know and love just found out his wife's been having an affair, Beth. So yeah, I'm not exactly my usual cheerful self." Silence on the other end of the line. Then, "Wes, that's a very serious accusation. Are you sure you're thinking clearly?" "Crystal clear. Tell me, Beth, when you saw Cleo and Owen at the Riverside Inn, did they look like they were discussing quarterly projections? Or did they look like they were planning their next hotel room rendezvous?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "Sure you don't. Give Cleo my best, and tell her that her little campaign to make me look crazy isn't going to work." I hung up and immediately called Jasper. "Thank God," he said when he heard my voice. "I've been fielding calls about you all morning. Your wife seems to think you're having some kind of breakdown." "My wife is trying to cover her tracks. Can you meet me somewhere? I have something to show you." "I'm off duty in an hour. Murphy's Pub?" "Perfect." Murphy's was the kind of dive bar where off-duty cops went to complain about their jobs and middle-aged men went to avoid their wives. It was dark, loud, and exactly the kind of place where you could have a private conversation without worrying about being overheard by the country club crowd. Jasper was already there when I arrived, nursing a beer and looking skeptical. We'd been friends since high school, and he knew me well enough to tell when I was serious and when I was just blowing off steam. "All right," he said as I slid into the booth across from him. "What's this about?" I pulled out the photos Vivienne had given me and spread them across the table. Jasper's expression changed as he looked through them, his cop instincts kicking in. "Where did you get these?" he asked. "Does it matter? The point is, they're real. Cleo's been having an affair with Owen Reece for months, maybe longer." "And you want me to do what, exactly? Arrest them for adultery? This isn't 1950, Wes. I want you to know the truth before Cleo tries to convince you I'm dangerous or unstable. She's already started calling people, telling them I'm having a breakdown, that I need professional help. Jasper studied the photos more carefully. These are pretty damning, but what's your endgame here? You going to confront them? Divorce her? What? I'm going to let them destroy themselves, I said. Cleo thinks she's in control of this situation, thinks she can manage the narrative and come out looking like the victim, but she's about to learn that some stories can't be managed. And how exactly are you planning to make that happen? I told him about my arrangement with Vivienne, about the plan we discussed at the cafe that morning. Jasper listened without interruption, occasionally shaking his head or taking a long pull from his beer. You're playing with fire, he said when I finished. This could blow up in your face. It's already blown up. The question is whether I'm going to stand in the wreckage or help clear the debris. And what about collateral damage? Owen's wife, for instance. She's innocent in all this. She deserves to know the truth. Would you want to stay married to someone who was cheating on you? Jasper considered this. No, I guess I wouldn't. But there are ways to handle these things quietly, privately. You don't have to turn it into a public spectacle. Cleo made it public when she decided to humiliate me at her parents' party. She wanted everyone to know she could leave me any time, that I was disposable. Well, now everyone's going to know exactly why. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Patricia Reece. Can we talk? I showed the message to Jasper. Looks like the collateral damage is already happening. What are you going to tell her? The truth. She's going to find out eventually anyway. Better it comes from someone who understands what she's going through. I texted back, of course. When and where? Her response was immediate. Now. Starbucks on Main Street. I'll be wearing a blue scarf. I found Patricia Reece sitting in the back corner of the coffee shop, nervously shredding a napkin and glancing around like she expected someone to jump out and confront her. She was younger than I'd expected, probably early 30s, with the kind of fragile beauty that suggested she'd been protected from life's harsher realities until recently. Mrs. Reece, I said, approaching her table carefully. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. Call me Patricia. Please, sit down. I ordered a coffee and joined her at the small table. Up close, I could see that she'd been crying, and there was a desperate quality to the way she kept checking her phone. I saw the photos, she said without preamble. From last night, you and Vivienne Lake leaving together. Everyone's talking about it. I imagine they are. Is it true about your wife and my husband? I studied her face, looking for any sign that this was some kind of trap, that she was working with Owen to gather information. But all I saw was a woman who was terrified of having her worst suspicions confirmed. Yes, I said simply. It's true. She closed her eyes and took a shuddering breath. How long? I don't know exactly. Months at least. Maybe longer. I knew, she whispered. I mean, I suspected. He's been so distant lately, so secretive. Always working late, always taking calls in the other room. And when I asked about it, he'd get angry, tell me I was being paranoid. I'm sorry, I said, and meant it. I know how that feels. Do you? Do you really? Her voice was bitter now. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're handling this a lot better than I am. You're out there making power moves, getting revenge, showing everyone that you're not going to be walked on. I'm sitting in a coffee shop crying into my latte. Trust me, the power moves are a recent development. Up until yesterday, I was just as clueless as you are. What changed? I told her about the party, about Cleo's casual cruelty, about the moment I realized that my marriage was already over and I just hadn't been informed yet. So you decided to fight back? Patricia said when I finished. I decided to stop pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. Your husband and my wife made their choices. Now they get to live with the consequences. And what about us? What do we get? We get the truth. We get to stop wondering and worrying and making excuses for people who don't deserve them. We get to decide what comes next. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the afternoon traffic. When she spoke again, her voice was stronger. I want to help, she said. Help with what? Whatever you're planning. I want Owen to face consequences for what he's done. I want him to understand that his actions affect other people, that he can't just charm his way out of everything. It's not going to be pretty, I warned her. And once we start down this path, there's no going back. There's already no going back, she said firmly. My marriage is over. The only question now is whether it ends with me looking like a fool or with him getting what he deserves. I thought about Vivienne's photos, about the plan we'd discussed, about all the ways this could go wrong. Then I looked at Patricia's determined expression and made a decision. All right, I said. Here's what we're going to do. The next few days passed in a blur of careful planning and strategic positioning. Patricia proved to be a surprisingly valuable ally. She had access to Owen's schedule, his email accounts, and most importantly, his weaknesses. Turns out the golden boy of the local tech scene had some interesting secrets that went beyond his affair with my wife. He's been embezzling money from the company, Patricia told me during one of our clandestine meetings at a diner outside town. Small amounts, but consistent. I found the records on his personal laptop. How small? I asked. About $50,000 over the past year. He's been funneling it through fake consulting contracts. That's a felony. Yes, it is, and his business partners have no idea. This changed everything. What had started as a simple revenge plot against an unfaithful spouse was now something much bigger. Owen wasn't just a cheater, he was a criminal. What do you want to do with this information? I asked. I want him to confess, Patricia said, to everything. The affair, the embezzlement, all of it, in front of witnesses. And how do you propose we make that happen? She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, she looked genuinely happy. Leave that to me. Meanwhile, Cleo was escalating her own campaign to discredit me. She'd convinced several mutual friends that I was having a breakdown, that I'd become obsessive and paranoid about her work relationships. She'd even suggested to a few people that I might be dangerous, that she was afraid to be alone with me. The irony was that her efforts were backfiring. The more she talked about my supposed instability, the more people started asking questions about why I might be unstable. And when those questions led to speculation about her relationship with Owen, she found herself in the uncomfortable position of having to deny an affair that half the town already suspected. She's losing control of the narrative, Vivienne observed during one of our strategy sessions. Okay, it's actually fascinating to watch. She's so used to being able to manipulate perceptions that she doesn't know how to handle a situation where the truth is working against her. What about at work? How is she handling things there? Poorly. She's distracted, making mistakes, snapping at clients. Yesterday she hung up on the mayor's wife during a conference call about the waterfront development campaign. That doesn't sound like Cleo. It's not. The Cleo I hired is cool under pressure, always in control of her emotions. This version is reactive, defensive, sloppy. If she doesn't pull herself together soon, I'm going to have to let her go. And Owen? Owen's been trying to distance himself from the whole situation. He's canceled 3 meetings with Cleo this week, claiming he's too busy with other projects. But Patricia tells me he's actually been spending most of his time trying to cover his tracks regarding the embezzlement. Speaking of Patricia, she wants to set up a meeting with Owen, somewhere public where she can confront him about everything. Vivienne raised an eyebrow. That could be interesting. When and where? Tomorrow night. The charity auction at the country club. Owen's company is one of the sponsors, so he has to be there. Patricia's going to corner him, get him to admit to the affair, and hopefully get him rattled enough to say something incriminating about the money. And you'll be there to witness it? We'll all be there. You, me, Patricia, Cleo, Owen, and about 200 of the town's most influential people. If Owen confesses in that setting, it won't just be gossip. It'll be a public scandal that destroys both his business and his marriage. And if he doesn't confess, then we move to plan B, which is? I pulled out my phone and showed her the recording app I'd installed. Patricia's going to be wearing a wire. If Owen won't confess publicly, we'll get him to confess privately and then make it public. The night of the charity auction, I arrived at the country club early to scope out the venue. The main ballroom was set up with dozens of round tables, a stage for the auctioneer, and display cases showing off the items up for bid. It was the kind of event where appearances mattered more than the actual charity being supported, where people came to see and be seen rather than to make a difference. Cleo arrived with Owen, which was bold even by her standards. They were clearly trying to project normalcy to show everyone that they were just colleagues attending a business function together. But I could see the tension between them, the way they stood just a little too far apart, the way their smiles looked forced. Patricia arrived alone, looking stunning in a black cocktail dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd spent the afternoon at the spa, getting her hair and makeup done, preparing for what she called her grand finale. "You ready for this?" I asked when she found me near the bar. "I've been ready for months," she said. "I just didn't know it until now." Vivienne made her entrance fashionably late, as always, commanding attention in a silver dress that seemed to shimmer under the ballroom lights. She surveyed the room like a general assessing a battlefield, taking note of who was there, who they were talking to, and how the various social dynamics were playing out. "Owen's nervous," she observed, joining Patricia and me at our table. "He keeps checking his phone and looking toward the exits." "Good," Patricia said. "He should be nervous." The auction began at 8 o'clock, with the usual parade of expensive items that nobody really needed, but everyone wanted to be seen bidding on. Art pieces, vacation packages, jewelry, wine collections. the kind of conspicuous consumption that made these people feel important. I watched Owen throughout the evening, noting how he barely participated in the bidding, how he kept whispering urgently to Cleo, how he seemed to be sweating, despite the air conditioning. Whatever Patricia had said to him earlier, she'd called him that afternoon to arrange a private meeting, had clearly gotten under his skin. At 9:30, during a break in the auction, Patricia excused herself and walked over to Owen's table. I couldn't hear what she said to him, but I saw his face go pale. He followed her out to the terrace, where they could talk privately. Vivienne and I waited exactly 3 minutes before following them outside. The terrace overlooked the country club's golf course, with small clusters of tables and chairs scattered around for people who wanted to escape the noise of the main event. Patricia and Owen were standing near the railing, far enough from the other guests that their conversation wouldn't be overheard, but not far enough that it couldn't be recorded. "I know about the money, Owen," Patricia was saying as we got within earshot. "I know about the fake consulting contracts, the offshore accounts, all of it." "I don't know what you're talking about," Owen replied, but his voice lacked conviction. $50,000 over the past year. That's embezzlement, Owen. That's prison time." "You're being ridiculous. Those were legitimate business expenses." "Expenses for what? Your hotel rooms with Cleo Farrow? Your romantic dinners? Your weekend getaways?" Owen glanced around nervously, clearly aware that they were in public and that their conversation could be overheard. "Keep your voice down." "Why? Afraid someone might hear the truth about what kind of man you really are?" "Patricia, please. We can discuss this at home." "No, we can't. Because there is no home anymore. There is no us. There's just you and your lies and your crimes. It's not—" Owen stopped, seeming to realize that anything he said could be used against him later. "I'm not discussing this here." "Then where? When?" "You've been avoiding me for weeks, Owen. Every time I try to talk to you about Cleo, about the money, about any of it, you disappear or change the subject or accuse me of being paranoid." "Because you are being paranoid." "Am I? Then explain this." Patricia pulled out her phone and showed him something on the screen. Even from where I was standing, I could see that it was one of Vivienne's photographs, Owen and Cleo kissing outside the Hartford Hotel. Owen's shoulders sagged in defeat. "Where did you get that?" "Does it matter? The point is, I have it. I have all of them, and I have the financial records showing where you've been hiding the money you stole." "I didn't steal anything. I earned that money." "By lying to your business partners? By creating fake contracts? By betraying everyone who trusted you?" "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You're a cheater and a thief, Owen. And tomorrow morning I'm calling your business partners and telling them everything." "You can't do that. It would destroy the company." "You should have thought of that before you decided to embezzle from it." Owen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the dark golf course. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "What do you want?" "I want you to confess. Tonight. In front of everyone. I want you to admit what you've done to me, to Cleo's husband, to your business partners. I want you to face the consequences of your actions." "And if I don't?" "Then I go to the police tomorrow. I turn over all the evidence, and you get to explain your crimes to a jury instead of to your friends." I could see Owen calculating, trying to figure out if there was any way to escape the trap Patricia had set for him. But she'd been thorough. She had evidence of both the affair and the embezzlement, and she was clearly prepared to use it. "All right," he said finally. "I'll do it. Now?" "Now." They walked back into the ballroom together, with Vivienne and me following at a discreet distance. The auction had resumed, but Patricia marched straight to the stage and whispered something to the auctioneer. He looked surprised, but handed her the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," Patricia said, her voice carrying clearly through the ballroom sound system. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have something important to share with all of you." The room fell silent. I could see Cleo at her table, looking confused and alarmed. Owen stood near the back of the room, his face ashen. "My name is Patricia Reece, and my husband Owen is one of the sponsors of tonight's event. He's also been having an affair with Cleo Farrow for the past several months." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Cleo shot to her feet, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, "Owen has been embezzling money from his company to fund this affair. $50,000 in stolen funds used for hotel rooms, expensive dinners, and weekend getaways with his mistress." "That's enough," Cleo shouted. "This is insane. Owen, tell them she's lying." All eyes turned to Owen, who stood frozen near the back of the room like a deer caught in headlights. For a moment, I thought he might try to deny everything, might attempt to salvage the situation with charm and lies. Instead, he surprised everyone. "It's true," he said, his voice barely audible. All of it. I've been having an affair with Cleo Farrow, and I've been stealing money from my company to pay for it. The ballroom erupted in chaos. People were shouting, phones were coming out to record the confession, and I could see several of Owen's business associates heading for the exits, probably to call their lawyers. In the middle of it all, Cleo stood at her table, staring at Owen with a mixture of rage and disbelief. This wasn't how she'd planned for her affair to be revealed. She'd probably imagined a discreet divorce, a carefully managed transition from one relationship to another. Instead, she was standing in front of 200 people who now knew exactly what kind of person she was. "Cleo," I said, walking over to her table, "I believe this belongs to you." I pulled my wedding ring out of my pocket and placed it on the table in front of her. "You were right," I said. "You can leave any time, but so can I." The next morning, I woke up to find my phone flooded with messages, missed calls, and friend requests from people I hadn't heard from in years. The story of Owen's public confession had spread beyond our little town, picked up by regional news outlets and social media influencers who specialized in relationship drama. "Tech entrepreneur confesses to embezzlement and affair at charity event," read one headline. "Public meltdown at Connecticut country club goes viral," read another. I was making coffee when someone knocked on my front door. Through the peephole, I could see Cleo standing on my porch, still wearing the same dress from the night before, but looking like she'd slept in her car. "We need to talk," she said when I opened the door. "I think we've said everything we need to say. Please, Wes, just give me 5 minutes." Against my better judgment, I let her in. She walked into the living room and stood in the middle of it like she wasn't sure she belonged there anymore. "I never meant for it to happen like this," she said. "Which part? The affair, or getting caught?" "Any of it. The affair it was a mistake, a moment of weakness that got out of hand. A moment that lasted several months. I know how it looks, but it wasn't about not loving you. It was about feeling trapped, feeling like I was suffocating in this perfect little life we'd built." "So you decided to burn it down?" "I decided to feel alive again. Owen made me feel exciting, important, like I was worth taking risks for." "And I didn't?" She was quiet for a long moment. "You made me feel safe, comfortable, predictable." "And that was a bad thing?" "It wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't enough anymore." I looked at this woman I'd shared 8 years of my life with, and I realized I didn't recognize her anymore. Maybe I never had. Maybe the person I'd fallen in love with had been a carefully constructed facade, and this selfish, entitled stranger was who she'd been all along. "What do you want from me, Cleo?" "I want you to understand that I never meant to hurt you. I want you to know that what happened last night, that public humiliation, it wasn't necessary. We could have handled this privately, like adults." "You mean you could have controlled the narrative, made it seem like we just grew apart, like it was nobody's fault?" "Would that have been so wrong?" "Yes," I said simply. "It would have been a lie." "And the truth was worth destroying both our reputations, worth ruining Owen's business, worth humiliating Patricia in front of everyone she knows?" Patricia wasn't humiliated last night. She was empowered. She took control of a situation where she'd been lied to and betrayed, and she made sure everyone knew the truth. The truth isn't always kind, Wes. No, it's not. But it's honest. And after months of living with your lies, I'll take honest over kind any day. Cleo sank into one of the armchairs, looking smaller and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "What happens now?" "Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. You find a new job, since I doubt Vivienne's going to keep you on after this. You find a new place to live, since this house is in my name. You find a way to rebuild your reputation, assuming that's possible." "And Owen?" "Owen's looking at criminal charges for the embezzlement. His business partners fired him this morning, and Patricia's filing for divorce. He's also dealing with the fallout from confessing to a felony in front of 200 witnesses." "You destroyed him." "He destroyed himself. I just made sure everyone saw it happen." "And us? Is there any chance we could work through this?" I thought about the question seriously, trying to imagine a scenario where we could rebuild trust, where I could forgive her betrayal, where we could create something new from the wreckage of our marriage. "No," I said finally. "There's not." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll have my lawyer contact yours about the divorce proceedings." "Already done. You'll be hearing from them this week?" She stood up slowly, like an old woman, and walked toward the door. At the threshold, she turned back. "I did love you, Wes. Maybe not the way you deserved, but I did love you." "I know," I said. "But love isn't enough when it comes with lies and betrayal and casual cruelty. Love without respect is just manipulation." After she left, I sat in my quiet house and thought about the past week. 7 days ago, I'd been a man living in willful ignorance, pretending my marriage was solid while my wife planned her exit strategy. Now I was a man facing an uncertain future, but at least it was a future built on truth rather than lies. My phone rang. It was Vivienne. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "Better than I expected. You?" "Excellent. I've had 3 new clients contact me this morning, all wanting to hire the agency that handled the most talked-about scandal of the year. So Cleo's public downfall is good for business?" Cleo's public downfall is a masterclass in crisis management, specifically how not to do it. She could have gotten ahead of this story, controlled the damage, maybe even come out looking sympathetic. Instead, she let her emotions drive her decisions, and now she's facing the worst possible outcome. And what about Owen? Owen's finished. The FBI is opening an investigation into his business practices, his wife is taking him for everything he's worth in the divorce, and his reputation in the tech community is destroyed. He'll be lucky if he doesn't end up in prison. Good. You don't sound very satisfied for someone who just got comprehensive revenge on the people who betrayed him. I thought about that. She was right. I didn't feel the satisfaction I'd expected. Mostly I felt tired and sad and ready to move on with my life. "Revenge is like junk food," I said finally. "It tastes good in the moment, but it doesn't really nourish you." Very philosophical. What will nourish you? I don't know yet, but I'm looking forward to finding out. Well, when you figure it out, let me know. I could use someone with your particular skills on my team. What skills are those? The ability to see through people's facades, the patience to plan a long-term strategy, the courage to follow through when things get difficult. Those are rare qualities in my business. I'll think about it. Do that. And Wes? Yeah? For what it's worth, I think you handled this whole situation with remarkable grace. A lot of men in your position would have done something stupid and destructive. You chose to be smart and strategic instead. After we hung up, I walked out to my backyard and sat on the deck, looking out at the trees that were just starting to show their fall colors. In a few weeks, they'd be brilliant shades of red and gold, and then the leaves would fall and the branches would be bare until spring brought new growth. It seemed like an appropriate metaphor for my life right now. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. "Thank you for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." I texted back, "You're stronger than you think. You would have figured it out eventually." "Maybe, but it was nice not to have to figure it out alone." "What's next for you?" "New York. I'm moving back to the city, starting over. What about you?" I looked around at the house I'd shared with Cleo, at the life we'd built together, at all the things that would need to be divided or sold or thrown away. "Same thing," I typed. "Starting over. Good luck, Wes. You deserve better than what she gave you. So do you." As the sun set over the Connecticut hills, I sat on my deck and planned my new life. It would be different from the one I'd imagined when I married Cleo 8 years ago. It would be uncertain and challenging and probably lonely at times, but it would be honest. And after everything that had happened, that felt like enough. The truth I'd learned wasn't always kind, but it was always better than a beautiful lie. And for the first time in months, that felt like a foundation solid enough to build on.